Belgium has many wonderful cities that are not well known to the typical traveler, and yet they are definitely worth visiting, especially a place like Liège. We shall be walking along many of its wonderful pedestrian lanes, passing hundreds of shops and a lot of outdoor restaurants. Belgium's divided in two socio-linguistic groups. Flanders speaks Dutch, Wallonia speaks French. Liège is one of the most prominent cities of Wallonia. A good place to begin our walking tour is at the Market Square in the center of the city. Throughout history, it's been the place people gathered to do business. Now it's an active plaza filled with outdoor restaurants, with historic sites around it, connected with many streets of the central city. It's that local kind of place where lifelong friends get together on a regular basis, have some beer, have a meal, enjoy conversations in that ideal outdoor atmosphere. It attracts a wonderful variety of people, young and old, visitors and residents of Liège. A good place to meet some locals. The Market Square is one of the oldest in the city, with origins dating to the 8th century. By the 18th century, 200 merchants crowded into this one square. It also had political and social importance as the main gathering place of the city. The column in Place du Marché, called Le Perron, is the most important historic monument in Liège because it represents the freedom and liberties of the city, especially back in the medieval times, when Liège had a relatively democratic system of government. This unified the people and enhanced their economic power, leading to their control of the eastern side of Belgium. Next to it is City Hall, built in the early 18th century in a classic style of brick and limestone. The City Council of the Middle Ages met here in a building called La Violette. The backside of Hôtel de Ville connects into the heart of the city center, and nearby is a bigger government building. The Palace of Justice is a courthouse and has offices for the legal administration. A small part of it has offices for the region of Liège. Right away you'll come upon a very busy plaza, Gare Léopold, which is the main bus station in the center of town, featuring several different bus lanes with lovely tree shading and shops all around it. A handful of narrow, old cobble lanes branch off from that busy place, tempting you to have a look. A few blocks south, you'll find the parish church of Saint-Denis. It was a fortified building designed to be part of the city's defensive wall. Founded in the year 990, it has the oldest Romanesque nave in Liège, and a choir rebuilt in the Gothic style. It's worth it to make time to keep wandering through these lovely little streets. The pedestrian zone of Liège is large, over a kilometer wide. Dozens of streets, most of them really quite interesting, that you don't really need a specific route or a map to walk through it. Just go and wander, take a left, take a right, whatever looks good. Maybe have a map in your pocket or on your phone to give you some idea, but feel free to just get loose and take a walk. And now let me contradict myself. At the same time, it is good to know the location of the main sites. That's why it's important to have sufficient time when you're visiting any interesting city. You want to be able to do some freewheeling wandering, but not miss any of those main sites. For example, this map shows the area we've just been walking in that circle, and while you're out walking, you'll probably run into some students. There are many schools here, of course, and a major university. This leads to Place Saint-Étienne with the modern facade of Galeries Saint-Lambert looming over it, which is the only large shopping mall in the center of the city, attracting 5 million visitors a year to its 40 shops. This road dates back to the end of the 17th century. It also borders on the edge of Galeries Saint-Lambert and was converted to a pedestrian mall in the 1970s. That mall occupies a large city block with Place de la République Française on the other side. Built in the 18th century, the square took its current name in 1918, with a wide choice of restaurants all around, or maybe just some Chinese takeout that you can eat while you're walking along. The place continues as Rue de l'Université, which leads a few blocks later to the central headquarters of the University of Liège. As we reach the Opera House, we're now leaving one section of town, the Old City, and entering into a lovely group of pedestrian streets called the Island, which is considered the best place in town for shopping. The street is called Pont d'Île, which means bridge to the island. However, there's no bridge here and we're not on an island, but in the old days, this whole area, this general shopping zone that we're walking through, was an island surrounded by the river and its branches. This street leads us right through the center of the main pedestrian zone of Liège, a neighborhood called Le Carré with about a dozen pedestrian streets. In French, Le Carré means the square, because the streets we're talking about are within a square-shaped district, about 400 meters wide, a fun place to explore for a couple of hours. This is the heart of town, the best place to take a walk and do some shopping, have some food, do some people watching, or just take a stroll. This is really the longest street of this neighborhood. Changes names, but it keeps going right through the middle. Let's meander and look at the other streets of this great pedestrian zone. Starting at one corner of the square at Place de la Cathédrale, which is a lovely flower garden and park next to the main church that we'll get back to later when we enter that church. Right now, we'll walk down one of the main streets at the perimeter of the square and then wander and meander our way throughout this lovely zone. Rather than attempting to describe the specifics about all the many shops, restaurants, bars, and cafes on these various streets, you can see for yourself what we're passing by, and I'll be describing for you the general picture and history of how this pedestrian zone was created. It was in the 1970s that pedestrian streets were first built around the Cathedral Square. At that time, these other streets that we're walking through had automobiles driving through with not much space for people. Of course, that was the pattern throughout most European cities at that time, but things quickly began to change as they discovered the many advantages of keeping cars out and letting people in. The momentum for this change really picked up towards the end of the 20th century when urban planning took center stage in Liège. The city sought ways to enhance the quality of life for its residents and visitors by transforming Le Carré into this pedestrian zone. The vision was to reclaim those cobblestone streets from the cars, revealing and taking full advantage of the unique historic charm of this area. Some businesses were initially reluctant, fearing they would lose customers if they couldn't drive, but business actually improved with more people coming through. A familiar pattern that we've seen happen throughout Europe. During the day, all the shops are open. At night, there's a party atmosphere with the bars and restaurants, and morning has a charm of its own. Taking a stroll in Liège in the early morning is a lovely way to start the day. You get out before the shops have opened, maybe right after breakfast at your hotel, and the streets are quiet, fairly empty, and they will pick up again pretty quickly by 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. The shops are all open and there'll be lots of people out. But earlier than that, it's a delight to just take a stroll. Rue Vinavadil is the very center of this shopping district called the Old Island. As usual, lots of shops and bars, restaurants, and terrace cafes. It's a very agreeable place. Connecting out from here, we find the very first pedestrian street in Liège. It is an upscale shopping passage. This is the first covered shopping gallery in Belgium, opening in 1838, 8 years before the famous Royal Gallery in Brussels. It was completely restored in the 1930s in the Art Deco style, in a uniform design with all windows looking the same, lending a human scale to what is actually a vast expanse expanse, 168 meters long with 30 stores. Expansion of this pedestrian zone is an ongoing process with more works planned for the near future, converting those automobile streets into places where people can comfortably walk. When you include all of the city areas beyond Le Carré throughout the city center, it is a huge pedestrian zone with about 60 streets, extending 6 square kilometers, which is considered to be the largest pedestrian area in all of Wallonia, the southern part of Belgium. And they claim it's the oldest pedestrian zone in the entire country. This beautiful fountain has 2 different names. It's officially the Fountain of the Virgin, with a statue of the Madonna and Child on top, and locals fondly call it the Fountain of the Lions because of those 4 beautiful lions surrounding it. It was created in the late 16th century by a famous Baroque sculptor, Jean Delcourt, a Liège native who traveled to Rome and became a pupil of Bernini. In 1854, it was relocated from Cathedral Square to this place and rebuilt. Then in 2015, a 1-year restoration work took place in which it was disassembled, cleaned, and reassembled with a new foundation, clean bronze statues, and working fountains. Nearby, we have Cathedral Street. It's an old road opened in 1842 and recently has become pedestrianized. Cathedral Street is part of the longest road in the center that changes names a few times. The square outline is the area Le Carré we had recently been walking through, and now we're heading down Rue Saint-Paul, approaching the Latin Quarter with the university 1 block over by the river. The street extends from the back of the cathedral, and it's another one of these typical pedestrian lanes with the shops and sidewalk restaurants. There just seemed to be something a little extra special about this one. It has an authentic local vibe. Along with restaurants, there are various food shops for takeaway meals. You could get a sandwich, pick up some cheese, and why not get some of those waffles that Belgium is so famous for? It seems that this street has mouth-watering temptations at every other shopfront. You could enjoy some gourmet food and save a little money by skipping the restaurant and getting takeout. Les Halles is similar, but not affiliated, with its namesake in Paris, presenting a perfect display of fresh produce and a big variety of packaged foods, spice, and condiments. Or how about a sidewalk market for books down at the end of Rue Saint-Paul? You'll get some bargains here with a big discount. While travelers don't usually buy heavy books to bring home, it's fun to take a look. This book market is as far south in the city as we're getting in our walking tour, but I want to jump further south to show you the train station, which is a superb work of art, of architectural genius by Santiago Calatrava, opened in 2009. And even though it cost a fortune to build, Liège feels very grateful to have such a landmark of modern architecture as the gateway to the city. This train station is becoming a signature attraction, acting like a magnet to lure more visitors to the city. There is another train development to show you in Liège, and that is the construction of a new tram system. It is scheduled for completion at the beginning of 2025 with an 11-kilometer length and 21 stations right through the center of town. They are working incredibly hard to finish it on that schedule, but the construction is limited to certain roads, and nearly all of the pedestrian zone in the center is not affected at all. So don't let that stop you from visiting before 2025. Then when it opens, it will be a wonderful enhancement to the city. This street is Hors Château, one of the most beautiful streets in the city. The name means outside the city walls. It was created originally in a location that was beyond the city walls so that the people who settled here back in the 11th century were living without protection from those fortifications. Then, in the early 13th century, another wall was added beyond the first wall so that this street was now protected. In those days, it was only a narrow footpath. Now it's a street with many beautiful buildings, most of which date back to the end of the 17th and the 18th centuries. Homes for the wealthy aristocrats. Now it's one of the main streets of the city, and although cars are allowed, it's a major destination for visitors, with many pretty sights, including this fountain. St. John the Baptist sits on top of this very impressive fountain and sculptured pediment, one of many fountains in Liège. Yes, it was very useful in the past for the people because they could get their water here for free. They would come with a bucket and fill it up and bring it home, because most people back in those old days did not have running water inside the houses. Next to the fountain, I noticed a party at a terrace restaurant. In many parts of Liège, there are these outdoor cafes, and people have a drink outside, or you can go inside, have a meal. In this case, they're having some kind of party. A gathering of friends and family for a wedding anniversary. This gigantic staircase is called La Montagne de Bourbon. It's not really a mountain, of course. They just call it one because the stairs are so big. It's a long climb with 374 steps. It goes 70 meters high at a rather steep 30% incline. But the steps were designed in a very clever way, with a kind of level terrace every 8 steps so that you can have a rest or you can walk back and forth as you go up to make your climb a little bit easier. So you can take the occasional break on your way up. And you'll notice that is the technique that many of these savvy locals use. These stairs are not very old. They were built at the end of the 19th century, and they say it was built for one particular reason: to give soldiers a direct route from their fortress that was on top of this hill down to the center of the city, so that they could come directly and quickly in case there were some kind of riots or demonstrations where their help was needed to calm things down. Prior to this staircase, soldiers had to go all the way around the hill to reach the city center, and they often arrived too late to be of any help. But they say there was another real reason why the stairs were built, to get the soldiers directly downtown, and that was there was a red light district near the soldiers' fortress. So when they left their barracks, they were never in a hurry to get downtown. So the city built this route to redirect them into the center. If you make it all the way to the top, they say you will get a nice view, looking back across the city center. This narrow alley is what they call un impasse, or we'd say impasse, as in no exit, a dead-end alley that goes nowhere. These alleys seem to be quite hidden, a place where a tourist would never find it. However, they are popular places. They're well known. They're one of the features of Liège, so visitors do come and search them out, as you can too. Easy to find. There are half a dozen of them branching off from Rue au Château. In the distance, you can see the hill covered with trees that rises up above the city. These impasses are havens of peace and tranquility, right in the immediate vicinity of the historic and lively center of Liège. They attract residents and walkers looking for quiet, picturesque, and green neighborhoods. This lush garden almost makes it seem like we're at a house in the country, with flowers, pets, potted plants, and benches. You know this is a spot that the local residents spend some quality time in. So peaceful, there are some free-ranging cats that walk around. That is always an indication that we are in a quiet and peaceful, safe neighborhood. Otherwise, there would be no cats in the middle of a city like this. It's a safe refuge with a dog keeping his eye on them. Although Liège is inland, it has what's called a maritime climate that's moderated by winds blowing in from the Gulf Stream. Winter temperatures are quite mild, and in the summer the climate is similar to Scandinavia up north. This little neighborhood has a microclimate that's quite pleasant and supports some exotic plants like this kiwi tree. This one is called l'Impasse de la Couronne, the Alley of the Crown. While walking along these various narrow alleyways, you'll notice lots of old houses, some dating back to the 17th and 18th centuries. In recent years, during the 1960s and 70s, they had really fallen into disrepair. They were ruined, and local authorities wanted to knock them down. But local people got organized to purchase and rebuild them. Most of them were restored, completely renovated in the 1980s. So now it's a very popular place to live. You see, it does make a wonderful adventure to meander into these little alleyways, which are located just along the north side of Rue au Château. That completes our walking tour of the historic center of Liège, one of the great cities of Belgium, located in Wallonia.